one of the bright spots in 340B, with all the challenges that we all encounter, is the opportunity to work together with you as you try to improve your operations, try to improve the things that you do to be compliant, and also to improve the business results that you achieve with McKesson and with Macrohelix. So my job is to start and to finish this. We're fortunate to have three people on our panel who will provide you with the insight that they've gained from spending a lot of time out in the real world working with you. First is Chris Shayne. Chris is the Assistant Vice President for 340B Solutions. Chris spends his time engaging in direct consulting. A number of you have probably worked with Chris over the course of the years, making certain that your 340B program is achieving the results that you'd like. I'm pleased to introduce a new member of our team, Kevin Shackelhoff. Kevin is a pharmacist as well, an experienced old hand with McKesson. Kevin has been here for about 17 years working in a variety of roles, most recently with our pharmacy optimization team, working in ambulatory care, specialty pharmacy, and he'll be sharing some of that expertise here as well. New to the 340B team, but certainly has encountered 340B in the work that he's done. And then the main event, as we'll refer to Brent, but certainly one of the things that as we've done these programs that we've been very pleased to do is we're able to draw from the relationships that we have in the field. We're pleased to have Brent Brummagem with us. Brent actually is the 340B program manager for Vanderbilt University. Vanderbilt enjoys a very robust 340B program, works in a variety of areas. Brent can certainly speak to all of them, but today we're going to focus on the opportunities in ambulatory and specialty pharmacy, certainly something that's near and dear to all of you. Our objectives are to talk about the key attributes and strategies of the 340B program, particularly as they relate to opening ambulatory pharmacies. We'll touch a little bit on contract pharmacy as well. Talk about overall market trends that influence DSH hospitals and others getting into the specialty business and working with other 340B entities. Try to gain some insight into developing a sound business plan and to learn about the elements of success. And in particular, we'll spend time talking about some of the things that Vanderbilt's learned as they've gone through that. So, without any further ado, let me bring to the podium Chris Shayne. Chris.
Thank you, Andy. So my job is to stay at a fairly high level here, and then Kevin and Brent will, I think, dive into some of the details and specifics that you come to see. But just to get us off on the right foot. Hospital-based ambulatory pharmacy and 340B is what we're here to discuss. And so looking at, why is this important, trends and forecasts, this information comes from a recent ASHP strategic pharmacy planning document. And we won't get too caught up in the specific numbers, but I think these three bullets going across the screen bring up three important topics. So the experts that were in pharmacy and healthcare that were surveyed across the country for this document expect 50% of health systems to have relationships with retail clinics over the next few years, between 2015 and 2019. Now, I don't think that's whether you believe 50% of hospitals and health systems will have relationships with retail clinics. One thing we've certainly seen is an expansion and growth of outpatient services. As hospitals and health systems talk about ACOs and potentially going down the capitated payment pathway, we see more and more outpatient centers being purchased. As CVS expands and Walgreens expands their clinics and people like Walmart consider getting into this space, it's hard to imagine that hospitals and health systems would ignore that and not consider partnering as we move forward. So, and part of that, of course, would entail outpatient pharmacy services as your health system continues to grow that outpatient space. 25% of respondents felt that health systems would conduct their own specialty pharmacy services with at least 3 disease states. Once again, getting caught up on the number I don't believe is important, but if you believe the first bullet, that a significant component or proportion of hospitals will continue to expand their outpatient footprint, will try to become regional players, will build more outpatient facilities, will partner with others who operate in the outpatient space. It's hard to imagine them being successful if they ignore the specialty drug space, which most estimates say over the next 3 to 4 years will be something like 50% of the total drug expense. It's hard to be a regional player and manage populations when you're ignoring half of the drug expense coming through specialty. Then the final bullet, half of the respondents felt that based on executive discussions with their health systems, that they would have some sort of business plan in place to expand pharmacist services for ambulatory patients. So you'll hear much more about that from Kevin and especially Brent. But I think the important term there is business plan. For those that are faint of heart, or for those that are very passive about this, I don't see you being successful in the near term. This will take strategic thought and planning and resources at the organization level. 340B considerations. We're at the 340B conference, correct? So at some point we have to nail this down into, how does this relate to 340B? So the first bullet point, 340B regulations remain in play. Your risk tolerance, this is the case for pretty much any ambulatory endeavor, whether it's specialty or not. But certainly in this environment where we're all sort of waiting on this mega guidance, where specialty patients with the referral patterns and the relationships between multiple outpatient partners in the hospital, that could certainly create an interesting environment for you to try to determine, who's truly eligible, who's part of your health system. So your risk for tolerance, or your tolerance for risk, will certainly impact how deep you go into specialty. The second bullet, what's your organization's ambulatory and specialty care strategy? You have to have one. Whether you start very small, you go grand, whether you have to partner or whether you build your own. At some point in the near term, if you don't have a strategy, I think you're going to find yourself behind the eight ball. Number three, how much of the opportunity is 340B dependent? I think that really, there are several things that are related there. One, what's your payer mix? If you're providing, if your plan is to build your own and provide care for everyone that walks through the door, including the indigent, these drugs are very expensive. That will certainly impact your business plan and how the health system decides to move forward in the specialty space. If you're going to work with primarily, partners in the community that already have this expertise, that would certainly look much different. But we like to, say on our team, and I'll attribute this to Andy, 340B will not make it a bad idea a good idea if 340B will not work for your institution, but it can certainly make a good idea much better. So that's sort of how we look at 340B. The cost savings are hard to ignore. The fourth, narrow provider networks, limited access drugs, competing commercial providers, and declining reimbursements. There's a lot here, and I could probably spend way too much time on this bullet, but narrow provider networks. For those of you that have entered this space, you know this well. For those of you that are thinking about it, you'll soon determine, if you haven't already learned at this meeting, even if the manufacturer decides to give you the drug, if you have if the care, the commercial care in your area is owned by one or two players that really don't seem convinced you should be part of their specialty pharmacy network, it's going to be very difficult for you to be in the specialty pharmacy business. It may require you to move from build our own to contracting with other players in this space. But that's certainly something that will be critical to your strategy moving forward. Can we actually get reimbursed for these drugs? And it's not simple. Limited access, can you get it from the manufacturer? There are data requirements, there are clinical requirements. Everyone in the room, I think, understands that something, probably over half of these drugs that we call specialty require some sort of permission from the manufacturer. You don't just call the wholesaler or the specialty pharmacy or wholesale distributor and say, give me the drug, and it arrives. There are additional steps that are required to access these drugs. And it's not always simple, and you won't always be successful, frankly, especially if you don't own a chunk of the country. Clearly, there's other competition here. I know when you look at the wording coming out of the specialty pharmacy summits, most of you in this room are looked at as sort of outsiders that they're not sure they really want to let in, frankly. And then declining reimbursements. As you know, these drugs are incredibly expensive. There will be a significant push to squeeze every penny out of these escalating drug expenses that the payers can, and reducing reimbursements to specialty pharmacies would certainly be on the table. So at some point, scale will be important also. And how can contract pharmacy options fit? I alluded to this. Frankly, as you develop your strategy, and as these two gentlemen will dig into this much more, as you develop your strategy, you decide what disease states, what populations you want to target, whether you buy or build or partner. For many of you that don't work for a large IDN, partnering with someone else may be a critical piece of that strategy. It may be the only option to access certain drugs and to take care of certain patients. So please keep that on the table. This is not just about building your own. It won't be that simple for everyone. Traditional versus specialty, I won't spend a ton of time here. We could all argue about the definition of specialty pharmacy, and hours later, I'm not sure we would really, it wouldn't be substantive. But I think it is important that we review, in general, what does the marketplace feel as a specialty drug? And certainly you, as a health system, have some idea as to what you feel is specialty, but probably more importantly, what do the manufacturers and the payers that sort of control this market right now, what do they consider specialty? So in general, we're talking about specialty drugs from specialist physicians, often injectable, although that's certainly changing. A lot of the new oral oncology meds and some of the MS drugs that are grabbing attention, HCV drugs, those are oral, so that's changing somewhat. We all know specialized handling, shipping, storage, significant expectations from the manufacturers there. The limited distribution model, I won't harp on this, but as we said, these manufacturers don't sell these drugs to everyone. They want to know if you can supply the data, if you have a sufficient population in place for the disease state for which their drug is used to be considered for the network. They're high cost. That's probably the simplest definition. That seems to work for me typically. They often require extensive patient counseling training, once again, not news to you, and additional reimbursement assistance. These drugs are incredibly expensive. Even the co-pays can be several hundred, if not thousands of dollars. So having some sort of patient assistance program in place is likely to be necessary. A couple of points I would add there, the data piece. That's not specifically mentioned here, but we find that from both the specialty distributors and the pharmacies and the actual healthcare providers, there are significant data requirements for many of these newer agents that are hitting the market. And you certainly need leverage with players. Our specialty team divides these drugs up, when we get beyond what's a specialty drug, they really divide these up into three broad categories. The first and easiest to discuss are these sort of ultra-orphan drugs. These are the ones that one or two distributors across the country are allowed to distribute the drug. It's a very small patient population. It's probably not something, unless you're a huge IDN or health system, you're probably not going to enter that space. You see a few patients a year at most. Then there's everything, a lot of stuff in the middle. Some of the new oral oncology agents, some of the new MS agents, drugs that the manufacturers will consider selling to you if you meet their criteria, their data requirements, their clinical requirements, and so forth. And then the last bit are, HIV meds, Hep C meds. Many people throw those in the specialty category, and many of those drugs have been sold through traditional retail pharmacies for years. So I think you have to think about that as you move forward. Where do we want to start? What do we have access to? And it's likely you won't know those answers clearly until you embark on this endeavor. So with that, we'll move forward and have Kevin talk about the opportunity and how you might forecast that and think about it more strategically. Kevin?
Thank you, Chris. My favorite television show is The Prophet. Have any of you seen this? Marcus Lemonis. Marcus Lemonis is the president and chairman of Camping World. It's a billion-dollar organization, but in his spare time, he does turnarounds for small businesses, and he invests his own money. So that's what this TV show is about, is where he goes in, and each episode is basically kind of a case study of these businesses that he's helping them with the turnaround. So what does that have to do with 340B? Well, if you watch this series, what you notice is there's kind of a pattern of things that are common characteristics with some of these businesses that are failing. And one of them is that most of these businesses have fairly poor financial reporting. They're enthusiastic about the business, they love the business, they're in and they're working hard, long hours, but over time, they just keep getting further and further in trouble. And usually the reason Marcus Lemonis shows up is finally they've had such material cash flow problems, they either can't buy products or they can't make payroll, which is why they need him to come in and stroke the check. And usually they don't have enough money to make the corrections that they need to set them on the right path. Well, this week I've heard a lot about people talking about the program's intent. The program's intent. You hear that in a great many of the sessions. The program intent piece that strikes me, though, when I look at this is they talk about stretching scarce federal resources. And when I see those words, what that says to me is that's a description of a fiduciary responsibility. It's about stewardship. Now, I realize there's a very, very valuable patient care component to this, and I'm not trying to take away from that at all, but there's also a fiduciary here, which kind of takes me back to the Marcus Lemonis piece, is there's a huge value in having the type of reporting and tracking that lets you know where you are. So I'm going to share a couple slides here with you, a little discussion. Chris and I have done some work in the field, working with some of your institutions. Some of these organizations are already in the ambulatory and specialty business. Some are looking at that business or looking to expand that business. And these are just kind of a few pearls along the way in terms of things that we've seen and kind of going down this path. So the one thing I would say is that if you're considering specialty and traditional retail pharmacy, those actually can, and in many cases are actually done out of the same physical space. From a State Board of Pharmacy perspective, you can do that. Again, back when you get to the financial reporting aspect of things, I would tell you that one of the things we see is they're materially different enough that there's a real advantage for you, I think, to kind of keep those two buckets separate. I mean, because what you're going to find is you're going to start processing these prescriptions, and one of them has an average price of $78, and the other one has an average price of $7,800. So some of your key metrics in terms of cost of dispense and gross margin and that sort of thing, if you mix the buckets, it becomes kind of difficult to tell where you are. So one of the things that we talk to people about when they're looking at traditional pharmacy is if you're thinking about going down this path, I think there's a real return to you if you take some time to do some forecasting on the front end, do some pro forma work, kind of think through this process. And that's true whether you're going to build out yourself or whether you're looking to contract pharmacy. So kind of the general way we kind of go about this is you want to look at your organization, every place that a prescription's written, so try to get some sense for the universe of things. Try to get a sense of, now that you kind of have an idea of what the universe is, what chunk do we think is 340B eligible, what's not? And then with this strategic placement of depending where I put the pharmacies and how I promote them or what I do with contract pharmacy, what percentage of that total do you think will come back? And that forecasting, I think, is really helpful on a couple of different levels. So, number one, it helps you set expectations, I think, within your organization, because I think one of the things that Chris and I have certainly heard from the field is my CFO went to an HFMA meeting and he sat with somebody at lunch and the guy told him, we're making, some horrific sum through whatever it is, their ambulatory operation, contract pharmacy, whatever. And that may all very well be true, but the circumstances around that particular individual's operation are probably very different than yours. And again, I think one of the things I've heard time and time again in a lot of the presentations, if you've seen one, you've seen one. It's really hard on either the traditional or the specialty side for you to look at someone's operation and say, gee, I want to duplicate exactly what they have. That's kind of a hard thing to do, unless your organization just happens to profile perfectly, and I'll tell you, that actually rarely happens. So taking this time to, I guess, number one, kind of get a revenue idea. And let me tell you why some of this detail, I'll give you an example of how it can be very valuable. So I know one of the sessions I was in, someone was talking about contract pharmacy contracts, and you go through and you look at the terms, and if you don't feel comfortable with the terms or you don't feel that the terms are adequate for your purposes, don't sign the contract. And I totally agree with that. But you got to realize that those patients are going to go to that pharmacy and they're going to keep going to that pharmacy. So if you take that off the list, that now changes your pro forma, because if it was a chain of 5 stores in your market and they have 35% of the market, they're going to have 35% of the market even if you don't sign that contract. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. my point is to readjust those expectations so that you're managing a reality. I mean, the other thing that I think that we know is going to happen is when the mega guidance comes out, there could be some rules in there that change the look of some of this. We're going to have people that we just did these pro formas for or did them a year ago, and I think the question is going to be is if these rules, the mega guidance is implemented as written, what will the impact to me be? You're going to get asked that question by people in your organization. If you have these tools and you've built these reporting infrastructures, I think you stand a much better chance of being able to go back and doing that in a reasonable timeline. Make sense? So specialty is similar, but I think it's a little bit more difficult in that the traditional pharmacy, you can kind of go through your list of clinics and you can look at encounters and you can figure, make an estimate of number of prescriptions per encounter, and you can build up a prescription profile in terms of what that universe is. That's not that hard. You can do it yourself. There's other people that can do that for you. There's support organizations that can help you with that. Specialty is a little bit different in the fact that there's many cases, so oral oncology agents would be a point in case. There's many cases where you never buy a single dose because 100% of those doses are administered in the patient's home. So you can run all of the sales histories you want, you won't see anything. So one of the things that we've seen be successful at a field level is prior authorizations are probably kind of the source of gold, at least I think in the oral oncology space. And if you get really lucky, when you go into your oncology area, there'll be one or two people that are responsible for that. So if you get those prior authorizations and you can profile those, you can get the drug, and then you can go to one of your clinical folks and say, okay, I know the PA was for this drug. Give me a rough daily dose. What would a 30-day supply be? And you can grid these things out fairly easily. The other thing is you want to know what the payer profile is on this. So who ultimately did provide the drug? They had this insurance, but who did that insurance use for a PBM? Because again, it's not going to match the payer mix exactly. Because again, what you're looking at here is you're trying to determine the total opportunity, what's 340B eligible and what's not, and then based on how you position your effort, either with a contract pharmacy or building something your own, you're going to be estimating what you're going to capture. And just know right out of the box, you cannot capture 100%. It's never going to happen. So you're looking at a subset. And again, that's why the payer side of this is so important, because if you determine that you can't get the drug or you don't have the size and the scale, are you talking about 3 partners, 2 partners, 1 partner? And again, this doesn't necessarily show up in your standard, payer mix details that you get from the CFO. You have to dig for these a little bit. And again, you can do this yourself. You can use third parties to help you with this. But I would tell you that this is a very, very important step. The other piece is that when you get the list of those specialty drugs, you can do a little bit of research yourself. Or if you have a resident, this is a really great resident project. You can take that list of drugs and you basically can just go over into your pharmacy ordering system, see what's in that system, see what is available in the general market. I think that it does vary by therapeutic drug class, but generally speaking, I'm guessing that probably half of the drugs or less are going to be readily available to you. Now, the other piece that I think that Chris and I have found in some of our travels is if you're kind of new to the game and you're looking at specialty for the first time, I think our advice is don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to do all specialty drugs. Figure out where your sweet spot is. If you have a concentrated oncology practice and there's a lot of activity there, that's certainly one place to start. The other place, though, I think that people kind of gloss over sometimes is if the HIV area is one where a lot of those drugs actually don't have limited access. So there's cases where everybody goes to oral oncolytics first because I think they're just in the news more than probably a lot of the other lines, and you certainly can look at that. But if you can niche and figure out, when you look at the profile of your specialists, because a lot of this is also, it's a scale issue. So when you're looking at specialty drugs, you have 2 hurdles, the manufacturer and the payer. And part of what they're going to look at is, what's the number of cases that you have per year? So, Brent's going to come up here in just a few minutes and tell you the story at Vanderbilt, which is, it's a fabulous, fabulous case study. But they have a very, very unique environment there in terms of the number of specialists they have and how far people come to get their care from Vanderbilt. That's hard to duplicate. Many places you don't have that. So again, you want to look at this from a strategy perspective and thinking through, again, looking at the availability of those drugs. What's the story to the manufacturer? And there's some of those that you're just not going to get. Again, if you're building your model out, you just take that one off the list and you go to the next one in line. You're not going to get a 100% capture. So the question is if you get a 20% capture, does that meet your goal? Is that consistent with what you want to do? Is there a potential here that you might not be able to justify it internally and you want to do it all through contract? The numbers will basically give you some guidance in the end. When we go in, and I would say generally speaking, I wouldn't tell you to do anything other than just make sure whatever decision you make, it's an informed decision. There is no right or wrong, go into it, don't go into it, expand, don't expand. I think the biggest thing is so that you're following that fiduciary, because that is part of the program intent, is the fiduciary side of this. The thing that I think it's a little bit disappointing or it's hard to see sometimes is we go into sites where people focus so much on the 340B savings that they're not looking at what the net profitability of a whole service line is. You can have a wonderful 340B savings number and be totally underwater. You have to understand both of those numbers, I think, in the context of providing service, if that makes sense. So I talked a little bit about the revenue side. I think the expense side is another piece. I think you want to do yourself justice, and you can't just count cost of goods and payroll. And we see people do that over and over again. So I think you're following your revenue, knowing what buckets those are in and who is utilizing and who's bringing you those prescriptions and how those are being paid for is important. And you also want to recognize all of your expenses. What can happen is if you slight a lot of those prescriptions, you really kind of overstate the program's net benefit from looking at it from a service line perspective. So one of the things that I know has been a challenge for some of the customers we've worked with, they never put anything in for the physical space. So it's, they have 1,500 square feet or whatever the case might be. There's no mention of any of that. Well, this causes a lot of confusion if a local pharmacy or a chain pharmacy comes in and offers to rent space off the lobby, because they're going to provide, an income stream. So now all of a sudden the organization is saying, well, there actually is an opportunity cost associated with that 1,500 square feet. So I tell you, here is something that you really can kind of steal from the independents and the chains is I can tell you that they are meticulous in how they do their financial tracking month to month. They know what their contribution is by payer. When it comes time to renew a contract, they know exactly what the contribution margin is for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of your state here. They know exactly where they are with Medicaid. The challenge you have is, and this is basically true of 340B in general, your EMR wasn't built for 340B, your ADT system wasn't built for 340B, your internal, department reports typically aren't built for 340B, but they also really don't do a great job in a lot of cases of providing a lot of granularity in, say, an income statement. So sometimes you can actually kind of use your pharmacy information system. Sometimes they have reporting capabilities in there that, again, let you do kind of that deep dive. Again, the big thing here is so that you're making informed decisions as you go down the road. So really the takeaways, again, it's kind of back to my Marcus Lemonis example. I think you can have the best of intentions, but I think you've got to have this roadmap. You want to, don't cheat yourself and not have the ability to make these informed decisions. This is a great investment of time, and it's never too late to start. We have a number of customers that we've worked with that really didn't have any reporting infrastructure. All of a sudden they kind of had some issues in terms of they couldn't really show the organization what their value was or wasn't, whether it was making money or losing. You can go back in and you can reconstruct these things and build them. I think with the pending changes that are going to come with mega guidance, and I have no idea what those are, but again, the more structure you have in place, it gives you some flexibility so you can go back, do some what-if scenarios, and try to get some sense for what the impact of changes as they may be. So again, that you can help manage those expectations and keep everyone in line. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Brent and let him tell you a little bit about his experience at Vanderbilt.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. It's good to be here with you guys tonight. I know it's kind of hard and we're, getting late. A lot of us are into day 3, day 4 of this. So I appreciate you staying around to learn a little bit about Vanderbilt. Again, I'm the 340B program manager at Vanderbilt, and we oversee a number of different buckets. A lot of the presentation that I'm going to give tonight is not going to be solely driven by 340B, but it's really going to look at our specialty business overall and really how that's developed, some of what you'll see in resources and needs, and hopefully gain a little bit of wisdom from some of the lessons that we've learned. So I think you guys hit on this really well, both Kevin and Chris did, is, we see specialty pharmacies are just the fastest growing segment of dollars in the pharmacy market today. And, we're looking at the cost of compounded development in the market at 2020 at about 66.8% of where we're at today. With traditional pharmacy being about 4.1%. So it's going to be really difficult to ignore specialty pharmacy in your organizations, and it's going to depend greatly on the organization that you have and the path that you take, how you choose to get your specialty pharmacy off of the ground, developed, what service lines you plan to do, and which ways you will build that business. Vanderbilt University Medical Center obviously is an academic medical center, and many academic medical centers are one of the areas where specialty prescriptions are being generated. And Vanderbilt University is not alone in that. We see that across the country, and most markets that have large academic areas is where we're seeing a number of these specialty prescriptions coming from. So we have a few different paths. Contract pharmacies, and Rick from the University of Kansas had a very rapid growth and a quick development, and he said that basically with the help of a partner, he was able within 3 months to develop an in-depth program with a small investment and have a positive outcome. Kyle at Fairview, which we've seen some of our friends from Fairview here, they might be here tonight, said that economics was the other piece in looking at their total cost of care. We wanted to completely stay in where the dollars are spent on specialty medications. And we want to be sure that patients on specialty medications should really be on them, and that they're using them properly, which can mean a lot of different things. Titrating that dose up, titrating it down, increasing it, or being more efficient in managing that patient. And that is going to be one of the responsibilities that a specialty pharmacy is going to have. So some of the minimum requirements, if you go down the path of having your own specialty pharmacy, which is really what I'll be focusing on this afternoon as we talk, is what we have as closed-door retail pharmacies. And by that, primarily closed-door retail pharmacy, most of you know, is providers that are our providers and our patients that are being serviced out of those. We don't have a lot of off-the-street business coming in. Now, to say that we are the only level 1 trauma center in the area, someone comes from Alabama or Kentucky, and they come in and they get a prescription for their lisinopril filled because they had no idea that their husband or wife would be in a car accident and may be there an extended period of time. We're probably going to fill that prescription. But for the most part, the majority of everything that we do is going to be in a closed-door retail setting. Make sure that you have resources that are available and space available for medication procurement and dispensing. This is going to be one of the keys to being able to provide medications. Another area that is rather unique is going to be in providing a mail service delivery and also cold chain distribution. And cold chain distribution is very large if you choose to go down this path on your own, because the majority of these drugs that you are going to provide are going to be cold and are going to require refrigeration. And that has its own unique set of needs in the summer versus the winter. And McKesson certainly knows this. We see this on a regular basis. We get 2 bags and an extra cooler in the summer. We get less in the winter. So there's a lot of different things that you'll need to consider in mail order and cold chain distribution. Benefits investigation is going to require resources, and I would suggest that that's something that you have someone who is very familiar with dealing with your payers with. You know, a individual that does not have a prior authorization is probably not going to get a specialty medication. So these are all areas that are going to require significant resources. You may get that prior authorization. It may go through. You may be an in-network facility, but the reality is, as Kevin said earlier, the copay may be $7,000. Well, I mean, let's be honest, $7,000, not a lot of people are going to have to be able to provide as a copay. So keep in mind that the copay and any sort of other assistance programs that you may have, patient assistance programs and pharma help and other programs that are there, you're going to be able to need to fall back on to be successful in this specialty arena. A call or support center that allows for 24 hours, 7-day-a-week contact with that patient. I mean, these are patients that are typically very ill and will need help, and their providers may have questions in the middle of the night. You know, they may have home health nurses, they may have, you know, various other people, family members that have questions, and it's important that you're able to give them what they need information-wise. We also want to make sure that you have on hand therapeutic management or clinic specialists or clinicians that are familiar with these drugs. You know, some of these are coming out very quickly. We've seen some rapid deployment of pharmaceuticals into the market. So make sure that your clinical specialists are available and have the knowledge that's needed. Patient education and counseling, that goes hand in hand in the specialty business, as you'll see in the next slide here. Staff education and training, it's a continuous process. We're training every day, and that's going to be something that you'll need to take into consideration. Program compliance and adherence to medication therapies is a must, and then also be prepared to take over case management. You may end up having specific situations in which the pharmacy is not used to. You know, different things that case management would take care of now that are becoming the burden of the specialty pharmacy based on taking on that patient's entire care. So there are some things that you really need to be cognizant of when you're looking at developing your program. So this is what our growth looks like at Vanderbilt. I can speak to this based on what I have seen and what we have gone through. And each individual entity, it's going to be separate for each one of you. There is no exact map. There is no floor plan. So as you think about some of these things, think about how it would work in your facility or your areas. For Vanderbilt, our first initial goal to get into the specialty pharmacy arena was to become the sole provider for the Vanderbilt University Healthcare Plan, which we have roughly 25,000 employees and somewhere in the ballpark of about 100,000 covered lives in our pharmacy network, or our pharmacy benefit manager, which is through Navitas. So when we took on the specialty pharmacy commitment with our own VU health plan, it allowed us to develop some of these key integral basic infrastructure needs to build a successful pharmacy. So as we began our rollout, this was step one or phase one. And as we moved into phase two, it was to be able to provide our patients with an offering of specialty services. This required quite a considerable amount of additional resources. It was additional staff, additional infrastructure, which is software, hardware, space, goes back to what Kevin talked about. That 1,500 square feet in the lobby, becomes very valuable very quickly. And so it takes on quite a bit of other elements that you would need to think about. We also added additional marketing. Patients on their own did not know that we had a specialty pharmacy service available to them. We have roughly 250 clinics. And so there are a number of clinic managers, there are a number of providers. There are very few of those providers that work in multiple clinics. So it takes quite a bit of communication and awareness and marketing to get out the word that we are there and we can provide to your patient this service. So keep that in mind as you move ahead. We also took on Arac Accreditation in September of 2013. So the map you're looking at is about 2011 up to 2015 where we're at now. And we've moved away from our second phase and moved into our third phase. We brought in some consultants to work with us, and that was very helpful. We developed specifically patient service models for individual clinics. How do we reach certain patients? How do we reach certain clinics? How do we reach certain providers? So then we also brought in a development of the value proposition. We added a significant amount of staff, so we had a full and complete set of resources that could be able to handle this. And then this also brings in a lot of different additional contractual work that you end up doing. And then also there is additionally infrastructure build out. And what that has taken us to now in 2015 from 2011 is a small area inside one of our retail pharmacies to an off-site location, which I will refer to as MSS. It is our Melrose Support Services, which we did not brand that as Vanderbilt Pharmacy. I'm sure most of you can realize we're in a business park. It is a large warehouse and in the great state of Tennessee, which I'm glad to live in every day. We have vehicles that drive through windows. We have people that are pulling all kinds of shenanigans that you probably would not even believe me if I told you. So we are totally branded as a completely neutral outfit. We look like we could be manufacturing dog food. So the MSS is our off-site facility that now handles our specialty pharmacy, and I'll show you how we got to there. So as we began the end of the specialty business, there was immediate growth, and it was significant, but we were held back by a number of barriers, and I think each one of you will experience barriers. I can't tell you that they're all going to be the same barriers that we experienced, but I imagine a lot of them will be. Just so you get a kind of ballpark idea, 10% of our patients we were unable to provide service to because we could not get the top 3 drugs that you see represented right here. This is 10% of what we tried to get. Initially, Revlimid, we could not get. Tecfidera, we couldn't get. Aubagio, we couldn't get. And the list goes on quite considerably. Fortunately, in some later slides, I have some more positive things to show you with these individual drugs. But then we really fight, on the other hand, for payer lockouts. And many of you know in your ambulatory space and your retail pharmacies how difficult it can be to get new contracts that are, viable for both of you to participate in. We were completely locked out from United Healthcare, which I imagine there are some friends I have here tonight that have had a hard struggle with them as well. Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, just to name 3. So out of that patient mix, 65% of the patients that we see in our 250 clinics, of about 2 million visits annually, would be qualified to participate in our specialty pharmacy. So as we got into this phase 2 and we really began to start the rollout and move forward in this process, as you can see, we needed to develop a clinical program that would meet the needs of the entire enterprise, each clinic. So what our model and practice model would be initially in this phase 2 is we would embed a pharmacist in particular clinics, and they would be a strong resource for the staff there in the clinics, the providers, the nurses, the intake folks. They play multiple roles that have been significant, and I'll give you a few testimonials, and it's pretty surprising how positive that's been. Their focus, obviously, is specialty pharmacy medication, and we put them in the areas that had the highest need. So need concentration was part of the consideration. And these individuals that are in these clinics, they are championing for these patients. I mean, they are the champion. I mean, the providers are there, the staff is there in the clinics, but we have the pharmacists and technicians that are there, and they are fighting every day to get access for these patients. We see to where this almost becomes a personal level at times. And, that's exciting to me to see that, there are people that are out there that still really care and really work to get medications for patients that otherwise would not have access to these patients. And there's some great stories with that too, and I'd love to share those with you, but I know it's getting late and I've got only a certain number of minutes, so I'll keep rolling here quickly. But so we expanded in June 2012 to the Hep C clinic and also the pediatric endocrinology. In April of 2013, we moved into oncology, rheumatology, IBD, cystic fibrosis, and the adult endocrinology clinic. And then in June 2014, we moved into pulmonary hypertension, pediatric rheumatology, GI, and cystic fibrosis as well. So from a historical perspective, we really needed some assistance. We had gotten to the point where we had developed the infrastructure, we had the people in place, but we needed some help. And so when we engaged an outside consultant, really their goal was to bring and help us pull through what we had operationalized on the pharmacy side into the clinic side to really allow us to help the patients fully get what we needed. So we identified a number of items, with the issues being on the left-hand side, observations and then recommendations, and I'll go through these quickly so we have some time for questions. But capacity, we found out very quickly we were understaffed. And so we requested additional staff. It was approved. We got the staff we needed. We had the support we needed, which is also large, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And communication, we are based in a hub and spoke model, which I'm sure many of you here tonight are. But it really makes communication difficult, especially when each clinic does not always operate in the same manner. So you move that methodology a little bit more and you put another roadblock in the communication, it gets difficult. So by bringing in these pharmacists and technicians into the clinics that have worked in the pharmacies and work in the pharmacy continuously, it really cuts down on those communication barriers and miscommunication. So that was one area that we felt was really good. Leakage, basically we wanted each individual patient to be seen in those areas by a member of the pharmacy staff, a pharmacist to sit down and talk with them, and not just on the specialty meds. If you had a question on another medication, we wanted you to get an answer. Our goal is to continuously provide information to those that need it, and this was helpful. It took a little more work, I'll be honest, in some clinics than others, particularly those where the directors felt much more ownership. It was harder to get that relationship built between the individual pharmacist and the director, but we did it, and I think we'll see here in just a minute how much more positive an outcome it can really have for a patient. Awareness, you need to be able to communicate out to your folks what you are doing. Are you doing a transplant program? Are you doing a Hep C program? What are you going to be doing? What will your specialty pharmacy really be focusing on? It's not going to be the entire arrangement of all drugs, especially as you start out, but communicate, make everyone aware, and try and do that in a way that marketing materials can be used so that everybody is getting the same message equally across the organization, and that will help drastically. What's the opportunity? Well, there's a lot of opportunity, and I won't go into it, completely, obviously, but there's a difficulty in assimilating all of the data that you're getting from these multiple systems, from your electronic medical record to your pharmacy information system, to some of the other hospital information systems, to your patient ADT feed. There's a lot of systems that are going there. So we are in the process of developing an operational tool that will allow us to pool that information together, which will be very beneficial in the long run. So what does a service model look like for a new prescription that comes into our pharmacy? Well, we coordinate at this point all the ordering, all the authorization of all specialty drugs. And so what this means is we assume the case management for that patient. And what we do is we conduct a benefit verification. We allow those other individual pharmacies, if that patient is not in our individual plan, if we don't have a contract, but they have a pharmacy, we work with that pharmacy. Our goal is to work with another specialty pharmacy in the event we can't help that patient, because ultimately patient care is what matters the most. So we'll forward that prescription on. We'll provide any individual information that we can that would be helpful or which would provide a better outcome. We obtain prior authorizations, and we are sharing electronic medical records between our clinics and our specialty pharmacy. So another big part of this, and this goes back to the 340B, and again, I said I wasn't going to focus a lot on that. I know you guys have really been churning the 340B boat, so to speak, here in the last week or so, but it allows us to fund and get funding and ultimately get the financial assistance that patients need to get these drugs. And then last but not least in this process is coordinating the delivery of that drug if necessary. And then we also do provide education. We will teach you how to create that injection, what to look for in that site, what does an infection look like, those types of things. So we continually strive to do better and provide any education if it's necessary. Through our patient management, there are a number of best practices, and Arac sets those out. Many of you are familiar with Arac, and our goal is for these complex therapies to follow Arac in best practice. We conduct a monthly follow-up with every patient that we do business with. I think it's valuable. Personally, I know of a number of patients that feel like they are getting a considerable advantage in the continuity of care with that follow-up. So I would suggest that, that you follow up with those patients to ensure the best possible clinical outcomes, their adherence, as well as benefiting the overall therapy. And then we have also started to meet on a regular basis between the pharmacy department, not just specialty, but all of pharmacy, and our prescribers and our clinic managers, as well as the pharmacy department, to see, hey, where are we at? What do we need to do to help you? This is what we need you to do to help us. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback and a lot of progression through that. So that's definitely a large piece of this. So what would it look like for a new prescription to come in? So you'd see the patient in the clinic. Let's start up here in this box. We'll start and we'll work our way all the way down through to this awesome little truck here. I could have stolen that. That might be out of patent, but let's keep that amongst friends. So we start in the clinic. The pharmacists see the patients. They build that relationship. They get the prescription information, all prescription information, not just specialty. They send it over to our specialty pharmacy billing coordinator. That coordinator goes through, works with the insurance company to validate the medications, to find out the copays, and then it moves on to a patient care coordinator. If that individual needs assistance with copay, if they can't pay at all, whatever the case may be, we're going to get you that drug and we're going to provide it to you. And again, that's one advantage of 340B, is it allows us to do that. If we were unable to use 340B in the specialty pharmacy business, we wouldn't be able to. But fortunately, we do, and we are able. So once that patient coordinator is there, works with the actual patient, speaks with them. That moves into the dispensing infrastructure that we have. It goes to a pharmacist, technician pulls it. Most likely, it's going to go into one of our cool boxes, may go into a regular box, and then it's going to get picked up for delivery. We do it twice a day, and we use two separate organizations. We use a courier for some local meds, which would be easier to deliver in a timely manner, and then we also use UPS to deliver as well. This is what a refill would look like. So we cut out the first three steps that we saw initially. So that billing coordinator will verify back again with the pharmacy benefit manager that this is still a patient, this is still eligible, this is going to work and go through. That patient care coordinator is going to call up and they're going to say, hey, Mr. Brummagem, it's the 25th of the month. You've got a prescription that's due. We want to know how you're doing. We want to make sure that you're going to be around. You're not going to be on vacation. We want to get you the drug that you need. And Mr. Brummagem may say, well, you know, I had the money last month. I put it on my credit card. I don't have it. I need your help this month. And we're going to take them through those channels and get them that help. And then we're going to follow up from there. We're going to put them in the queue. We're going to get them into the pharmacy information system. We're going to dispense it, and we're going to get it out the door. So we have made some significant growth, and it's really positive, and I'm really happy to say that we're continuing to grow this initiative, and we have reached some very good milestones. Initially, we had about 10% of patients that were eligible that we couldn't get drugs for. In the last 4 years in our efforts, we've been able to get access to Tecfidera and Aubagio. We have not been able to get Revlimid, which, you know, I keep holding out hope every day, but we keep fighting that battle. The payer lockouts that were the most significant, we're in process with all of them, but Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama. We all know how those contracts work and red lines and comments and version 1 through version 19. So be prepared for that to continue. It's not any different in the specialty space. It can get very difficult. And all I would say as a takeaway is make sure you version your contracts, because I have sent back contracts that were version 14 when they should have been version 19. So just make sure that you get to that point. Make sure that you keep your documentation for your contracting in order. Make sure it's all in place and keep records. They'll be very valuable. So what we have now are 20 clinics that are staffed by 22 pharmacists. We have 27 individuals in the call center, and we have 25 technicians that are patient service representatives. We have some additional governance and performance. We have an executive steering committee that meets twice monthly. That consists of our C-suite as well as our legal department, our Department of Finance, obviously Department of Pharmacy, and we work through issues there. We've also been able to build a number of different reports and metrics to show us where we can gain, where we should be going, and what path we can get on to be more successful for both the patient and the entity. And we look to increase our market share. We always are looking to do more, do better. And by doing that, we also want our customer service to be raising its bar every month. So these metrics will be very helpful as you grow your business, so you know exactly where you are on a monthly basis. As Kevin had talked about, it is beyond important to have strong financials so you can see where you're at, and let those other reporting metrics come in. Use the reports that you have. Andy's done great work for us. We've needed some special reports made. McKesson has worked with us and said, hey, you know, we have some advantages, we have some data, we can help you. And let the individuals around you help you that can. So there are a lot of folks that are willing to help, and allow them to help you when they can. So where we're at now, we still have challenges. Nothing is perfect. Limited distribution drugs, you know, we've made some impact. We've gotten a few, but honestly, this concerns me quite a bit, is that limited distribution is going to continue to be an issue, and it's going to become much more of an issue as we move forward in the specialty arena. Our overall approach is through our P&T committee, and then this is going to be an enterprise-wide or health system-wide process. Many of these drugs that we do not have access to in the LDD market, we participated in the trials. They came through our pharmacy. We trialed those drugs. They came to market, and they did not give us access to those drugs. So it really throws me for a curve a little bit. It's outside of my understanding, but be prepared to see that. I mean, this is the market that we're in. I think LDD is just now becoming what we're going to see a lot more of in the future. Payers are going to continue to lock out, and I think that everybody is tightening their ropes. There are contracts that are coming through now. Some, and I think all of you have probably heard since we've been here this week, that contracts are coming through asking about your hospital's 340B status and its reimbursement rates. So, we see payers in that area. Our goal is we try to contract with every plan and meet them where they're at, but the reality is you're not going to be able to get them all. Technology. Boy, I'll tell you, this is a big one. This is our largest initiative now, is to integrate all of these different systems that we have, from medical records to dispensing records to patient records to manufacturers to wholesalers, to be able to amalgamate those into one strong database that we can utilize. And that's really where it's at. The data tells the whole story. So make sure your technology is there. Make sure that you can get some resources from your IT department. You can get the feeds that you need and the information that you need to be successful. And then clinic provider support, that's a big one. Make sure that your clinics, there are a lot of different clinic managers I've worked with. Some like me, some don't. I don't know. I can't say what that breakdown is. I'm scared to think about what it might be. But, there's always going to be very much a territorial feeling that these are their patients. It's not a shared feeling. So just realize that up front that, and I've realized that, the more I can provide them with the statistics, the things that show them how much better patient care that their patients are getting by us helping them is very significant. So develop some marketing tools and really try and leverage what you can with the IT department to provide you what you can. So these are just some of the positive things that have come out. I won't read them all. A physician said the pharmacists have contributed and improved our workflow for the clinic while improving patient experience and patient safety. And that's exactly what we want. That's our goal. Another physician said the pharmacist presence has greatly expanded our ability to care for our patients. And that's what we all want. And then one of our clinical pharmacists said, patients feel cared for. We're able and willing to go the extra mile. And that's absolutely true. So, it really does allow you to get a stronger continuity of care between your patients through these programs. So this is what we have on the agenda coming up for 2015. This is where we're at. We really, our goal is to retain and serve our existing patients. We want to improve our value proposition, improve our quality indicators. We want to grow that market share. We want to build strategic relationships, especially across payers and with pharma. Keep that in mind as well, because some and many of these are going to be, entirely based on a relationship that you have with that pharmacy company. And then build a solid operational foundation. Develop knowledgeable staff. And that was our goal is with Vanderbilt Specialty Pharmacy, was really to develop that. Make sure that your workload is attainable. Make sure that you're able to provide staff and they're capable of handling the workload that you give them. Build operational dashboards. That's been honestly one of the things that's helped us the most, and our consultants have been very good with manipulating that data and giving us dashboards and roadmaps where we're at, where we're going, where our focus needs to be. So make sure you can go down that road. Have a strategy for your IT. Know what you need and how to get there, and then work on your resources backwards to see what systems you can pull together for that. And then one of our big, main goals for 15 again is really complete phase 1 of the IT roadmap. And that's a whole nother story for another night. I know we're over here. I appreciate you letting me take up your time. I appreciate McKesson helping us in this process, and thanks for staying. And I'm glad to answer any questions that you might have. I know that I'll stick around for a while. I'm going to get out of the way since I ran over on time. I
No, you're good.
apologize.
So I appreciate, thank you very much for staying. We're certainly very valuable information, and we appreciate your sharing detailed and very focused insight. And also thank you to Kevin and Chris for talking more broadly about the market and what's going on. Take a question or two, but recognize that some of you may have dinner plans and want to sneak out the back when we're talking. But anyone have a question or comment for Brett? If not, thank you very much for your time. Come on up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.